Get started.
Well, good evening and welcome to devotion on this Wednesday evening. You might notice my surroundings have changed because we're under a tornado warning and I'm in the basement, as many other people are. And I forgot to bring my charger down, but I think I'll have enough juice. We'll see. If everything goes black, other people are going to take over. I did find something I wanted to share this evening, and this is we've talked about this before, but I thought this was just a well-written thing. It's written by Julie Pennington Russell, who is pastor of First Baptist Church of the City of Washington, D.C. And this was posted on the Central Baptist Seminary newsletter today. And it's called Public Engagement from the Contemplative Heart. Whoops, my lights just flashed. She begins with a quote from Thomas Merton. He who attempts to act and do things for others or for the world without deepening his own self-understanding, freedom, integrity, and capacity to love will not have anything to give others. And so she writes, it's an understandable declaration. Praying about injustice isn't enough. God is calling me to do something. This is a fair claim on the part of Christ followers, as the tidal wave of racial, social, economic, and environmental injustices continue to engulf our nation and world. Ours is an active faith. I was hungry and you fed me. I was a stranger and you took me in, said Jesus. Faith, if not accompanied by action, is dead, said James. And yet, just as faith without action is useless, so peace and justice work, if not connected to the life-affirming presence of the Holy One, must find its energy elsewhere and often winds up operating from the realm of the ego with its need to win, convince, and/or differentiate itself from the other. As the U.S. reckons in this moment with disproportionate deaths of African Americans from COVID-19, police brutality against Black lives on display, daunting unemployment numbers, and bitter divisions along political and religious lines, our nation and world are in desperate need of prophetic people who are transcending the categories of liberal and conservative as they integrate their activism with a contemplative mind and heart. One common misconception about contemplative Christianity is that it avoids real engagement with the pain of the world while remaining cloistered in the prayer closet. But contemplation is not the absence of action. Contemplation is a reflective way of acting upon God's call. Contemplative prayer inevitably leads to action grounded in the love and way of God, who is anything but passive about suffering. Contemplation, from the Latin contemplare, it means to gaze, to behold, observe, pay attention. A contemplative is simply one who is learning to pay attention to divine presence in each moment. Someone who's learning to see beneath the surface and listen beneath the noise. Contemplatives are those who are discovering what it means to be present to presence with a capital P, whether praying in a secluded hermitage or marching in a protest. So she offers an invitation towards heightened awareness, 3 ways. If we want to live as people who lead, serve, and advocate from a grounded place with God at the center, I invite us all toward 3 particular areas of heightened awareness. Number 1, notice when the speed at which we are moving and thinking exceeds our ability to be fully present in each moment. While we live in a rocket speed society, we have wagon train souls. If we want to be present to the tasks and issues and people around us, I believe we must tap into what the 20th century contemplative Gerald May called the power of the slowing. The Holy One invites us to ease back the throttle, not just with our body, but also with our mind, which is constantly in motion as it plans, anticipates, strategizes, compensates. Becoming still seems counterintuitive when there is so much around us that needs doing. And yet, as we allow ourselves to be led beside still waters, we are best able to discern what is ours to do. trusting that we can make a difference in our own gifted way. Number 2, notice when we are operating primarily from our ego self. The ego is not our enemy. Our sense of self is a gift from God that helps us function in the world. And yet, when we identify with our ego self as our ultimate reality and our ultimate identity, more than our grounded in God identity, then we filter what we see, hear, say, and do through that narrow self-centeredness. How is this going to affect me? What opinion will people form of me if I do this, say this, post this? When we see and listen and live from our deepest, truest identity beneath the ego, then the work we do, the leadership we give, the conversations we have, and the prophetic actions we undertake will be grounded in the animating presence of the beloved. Number 3, notice when we are operating primarily from our analytical minds. As with the ego, our mind is not our enemy. Our mind is a gift from God. And the rational mind is relentlessly dualistic. It knows by comparing, opposing, judging, differentiating. Our mind also assigns binary labels: good, evil, beautiful, ugly, black, white, right, wrong. As long as we're aware of this, we can receive and appreciate our analytical mind for what it is, helpful in many ways, and yet wholly inadequate for dealing with the deep mysteries of God, grace, pain, sexuality, suffering, death, love. If we want to be fully present with God in each moment, our rational, analytical mind can't get us there on its own. Contemplative people have much to offer our ruptured world. The contemplative Dorothy Day co-founded the Catholic worker movement and championed the plight of the poor. The contemplative Howard Thurman was a principal architect of the nonviolent civil rights movement in America. The contemplative Desmond Tutu stood up for peace and justice during and after the darkness of apartheid in South Africa. The presence of the beloved is constant, infinite, and everywhere. We cannot not be in the presence of God. As we grow in our capacity for prayerful listening, we can notice and join the movements of the Spirit that bring healing, liberation, and life. I was struck by several things in that, partly just that rocket speed society with wagon train souls, which I think is a good way to say that. And then that discernment leads us to what is ours to do. I think we tend to cast around and look for, oh, well, we need to do this. We need to do what other people are doing. We need to join in, and that's not a bad thing. And yet the sense that we find, what is ours to do? What are we uniquely gifted to do? What are we called to do? And what are we ready to do? And I just thought it was really insightful talking about the ego, that the ego is an important part of our personality, but it can't get us all the way to where we need to be, as our analytical mind cannot do either. And so I have not generally styled myself as a contemplative person. I tend to think of contemplative people as deeper than I feel like I am, people who are more willing to spend more time, because I tend to be sort of a horizontal person that wants to connect things together, but I don't always have the patience to go deeply into things as I feel like I should. And yet I do, and I have often commented on the need for us so much to pay attention to the world. To me, that's one of the highest callings and the most important callings we have as Christians, is to pay attention, to be where we are, not to move too far ahead. And so I think that's what she's calling us to do. So as you contemplate where you are, and of course we all are in a place where we've maybe have more time for contemplation, and yet maybe we don't spend that time as we might. I hope that you take to heart this need to gaze, to behold, to wonder, to pay attention to what God is doing, and to order our lives in such a way that we first listen to what God is doing, for what God is doing in our lives and in the world before we strike out to do things without having contemplated the costs. Thank you for joining us on this stormy evening. Pray that God will be in your contemplation and in your work for justice and peace and righteousness. May God bless your evening. Stay safe.